are you?
Hi,
Good to see you.
how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing awesomely well. Awesomely well.
Oh, nice.
Yes. Tell me what's going on. Give me an
Oh,
update.
you are gonna crack up. Just wait. So last week we had like it was good. I was in such a good place. I was in such a good place. And literally that day, it was like
Yeah, yeah.
which is, I mean, it's just divine teaching. That's really the way I saw it. So by that point, by the time you and I connected, it was midday. So after our call, I had maybe 4 or 5 other calls. So I was back to back. So I was not doing a good job in taking care of myself and keeping my well-being kind of at the forefront. And so final call of the day that morning, I got up at 5:30 to like start working, which whatever. Um, but my last call of the day was from 4:30 to 5:30 last Wednesday, and my best friend's grandma comes over and helps me with the baby. So about 15-20 minutes into that call, I told her it was an hour. He normally goes to bed between 5:30 and 6. So I already knew I was cutting it close. Like I was just doing entirely too much. But long story short, he was freaking out. She had my oldest son bring him downstairs to see me, thinking that if he just saw me, he would calm down. And of course, if he sees me, but I'm on a call and like not engaging, it just made it worse. So I wound up having to like jump off of that call. I was super frustrated and really just like had to leave the house. I just needed to like gather my thoughts, get my mind back in order. But it was the ultimate lesson of making sure that I am keeping to my time on the calendar to go outside and get my sunshine, and taking my breaks during the day to meditate and breathe and eat. That day I had like 4 bites of salad right before our call, so I hadn't even eaten all day. So it was just like all of the things that in hindsight you look back and say, oh well, that was a recipe for disaster. You you set yourself up for failure. But that whole evening I kept saying, man, if only my call with Dr. Smith would have been like just a few hours later. She could have talked me off the ledge. So I couldn't wait to tell you
Wow.
about
You are raising a very good point that, sometimes self-care is on the bottom of the list,
it. Yep.
especially if we've never done it before or we're not in the habit of doing it. We can think, well, I can handle this, I can handle it. It's that strong woman kind of thing, which we are strong, but we also need self-care.
Yeah. Exactly, exactly. So I mean, this week has been a lot better. I've just been so intentional around taking care of myself and doing what I need to do. My husband and I got into a little tiff day before yesterday, and I just kind of walked away. I was like, you know what? You're not pulling me down into this mess. I don't have time for it. I was having like the highest vibrational day I've had ever. So I was like, oh no, I'm not playing this game with you.
Right, right.
But it's really an evolution. It really is something that continues to evolve and ebbs and flows and goes, forward and backwards. And so I think just having patience with myself and with others, and just recentering on having compassion and knowing that we're all human and people aren't intentionally trying to upset me or wreak havoc on my schedule. It just, that was the universe's way of saying, okay, well, if you won't stop and slow yourself down, then we will insert ourselves to making that
Right,
happen. So
right. Yeah, those are really good lessons. And I think it's a really good lesson because, we always have this image of Buddha, which, oh, I have one right here. Let me
show
show
me.
it. We always have this image of Buddha
Yes,
that
calm.
is always calm. And the truth is that there's a lot of stuff going on, but we have to remember to get back to this state,
Yes.
that we think that it's going to be 24/7, and
Mhm.
no matter what is going on we'll have this image or we're supposed to be this.
Right.
And that's an unrealistic expectation. It's just a reminder that we could have this
Hmm.
inner peace.
Yep.
So there could be chaos around us,
Hmm.
but it's like, okay, we center ourselves and say, what story am I telling myself about this?
Yeah. In the midst of that little tiff with my husband, it was exactly that. It was, okay, let every in this moment I am safe. In this moment I am loved. He is, a human and is not attacking me personally. And so it was just a lot of that constant messaging of myself so that I could be calm, so that I wasn't my heart rate wasn't racing through the roof. And I think, every time this happens, the time that it takes for me to reset back to center is less and less. So progress is still being made, even though contrast is continuing to show itself. I'm just learning to be more like, I'm not saying I'm perfect, right? I stormed out of the house last week. So it was very much not a perfect person reaction, but, you know, doing what I can to get myself back and knowing that I can get myself back, where before it would just be the perpetuation of the narrative of what the other person was doing wrong and woe is me and why are they this way and if only they saw it my way and blah blah blah, and that would go on forever. So it's the quick recovery, as quick as it can be, right? It's certainly took me time that evening on Wednesday, and it certainly took me time, the day before yesterday, but it was an intentional effort, and it was much quicker turnaround time than what I'm used to.
That's really so big. That is so big. Because you were able to, when you were by yourself, say, what story am I telling myself about this?
Mm-hmm.
And usually when we've had childhood stuff happen, and I think that's 90% of people, so it's not a small minority. But when we've had stuff happen when we were kids, we were powerless to uh, do anything about it. We didn't have any power as far as going out and renting our own apartment at the age of 5. I mean, we didn't have that
If only
ability.
we would have been some powerful 5-year-olds out there renting apartments.
We would have been so out of there.
Totally, totally.
but but those feelings of this is intentionally hurting me can be triggered as an adult, and it comes from those times when we felt most powerless.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have to, like you said, stop and go, I am totally loved right now. This is not, doesn't have anything to do with me not being loved, me not being cared for. This has to do with this old stuff
Yes.
coming up.
Yeah. And what I've realized in, the patterns of my response in these situations is I am compelled always to flee the scene. Like that is my safety net. That is my security blanket. Like, let me just get out of Dodge. Let me just get away from this situation. And so that's what I did with on Wednesday. But when I got into that little tiff with my husband, that's what I was wanting in my head to do, was very much to like go find an Airbnb, get a hotel, go sleep in your car somewhere, like just get out of here. But I had to keep reminding myself, like, well, are you leaving your marriage? Like, what are you leaving? What is it that you are turning your back on? And so, luckily I didn't leave, because that would have
Yeah.
made that situation worse. But in, leaving on Wednesday, it was very much, I had to leave to take care of myself. Like that
Yes.
was, that was what I needed in that moment. But it is something that I've gotten a little bit of clarity on, that fight or flight. I am very much a flight averse stress person.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's also big to know about yourself, because a lot of people don't know what that trigger is and what it looks like when it comes up, and they're just like caught up in the moment, and then they think they've resolved it by doing the flight, and you haven't resolved it. You're just on to the next trigger.
Yep. Yep.
And so once you figure that out and you kind of know yourself a little, that, and it's not necessarily you're learning about yourself. Your true self has never been hurt.
No.
What you're learning about is that
Human
old
self. Yeah.
trauma. Yeah.
Fleshly self. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. The things that you did to survive the
Yes.
traumas and stressors of your childhood are now very much the cloak or the representation. That's just what happens. That is, I don't know how to explain it. I'm sure you have a better way of explaining what my brain is trying to tell me, but yeah.
I totally understand that scenario. It is like taking off a layer of clothes that you no longer need.
Mhm.
You've been layering on this protection for so many years.
Yep.
And, when you were younger, yeah, you could go, things were tough. You went to school and you didn't have maybe your parents or that alcoholism in your forefront. So maybe we learned as survival that, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do is I'm supposed to flee the scene, get distracted with something else so that I don't have to look at this. And so we put that on, and then as we get more aware
Mhm.
and we have more life experiences, we can make a choice and say, let me look at this. What is this? And then, like you said, you do meditation, you do self-care, and then these messages come to you, or you get in therapy or whatever, you see a webcast, something triggers, you go to church, whatever it is, your friend says something, or you see the ludicrousness on a bachelor show and say, wait a minute, that is something I used to do, want the attention of men, but that looks stupid. So, however, you get to a point, and everybody's different, and that's okay. You get to a point where you say, wait a minute, what is real and what is not real, and what can I do to stop doing this pattern? Because it's like a hamster wheel.
It is. It is. And I think realizing that it's not just us on our own hamster wheel, that everyone else is on theirs too. And so I was watching, so every Saturday morning, Ayanla Van Zant does like a spiritual spa or like a teaching for the day.
Mhm, mhm.
So generally, I'll either tune in like end of day Saturday or early Sunday and just kind of watch it. And it was all about trusting love and having tenderness and compassion and just reminding ourselves if, you know, if you think about the way you talk about your child, you always tend to come from a place of love and giving the benefit of the doubt and having compassion because that is your flesh walking outside of you. And so thinking about ourselves in the context of we are the children of divine source and they would not, source would not want us to be suffering and all, up in arms. And so understanding the difference between who my spirit and my soul is versus who Leslie Johnson in the world is, and bringing those two people as closely together as possible, but knowing that when Leslie Johnson in the world has contrast, that the spirit of who I am is still divinely guided and loved and doesn't feel any of this contrast. So I think that knowing allows the I don't know, the coming back together to be more likely.
Yes, and shorter period of time because you've made that connection.
Yeah, because I mean, I'd be pissed off for like I was the queen of holding grudges. Like, okay, okay, I'm not talking to you for a month.
Yes, yes,
Without me. But yeah, I don't think I have to necessarily go to those extremes anymore.
right,
Mhm.
right. Right, because those things were just blocking us from love, blocking us from being aligned with spirit, like you said.
Mhm.
And once we recognized that, oh, well, that was keeping me from the source of all happiness. That was keeping me stuck
Yep.
and in my fear, really, stuck in fight, flight, or freeze. So once we recognize that, like you said, that's pretty big. That's awareness. You've expanded your awareness.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, and even as I think about the relationship with my boss and the frustrations that I've had with him, it's recognizing his position of being in fear and making it intentional that I'm coming from a place of support and compassion versus, well, why don't you see it the same way that I see it? um, I think is allowing us, and it's a work in progress, but it's allowing us to get closer on what our visions are of the future. Um, and so I think it's positive because, you know, initially when he kind of pissed me off most recently, I went into, well, if this isn't a priority and, you know, da 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 da, and you're not taking this seriously. And it really didn't have anything to do with how he was responding to that. It had more to do with how I was being triggered by what he was doing and recognizing my own response to it, because what he does is what he does. It has, you know, sure, it might interfere with the calendar of my life, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't like hold any weight. And so, you know, coming back to that, having conversations around, look, I want to help the team. This is my vision, and challenging him to think about things differently allows us to have that dialogue of, you know, combining ideas versus him versus me and me versus him.
Yes. You know, I can't help but think when you talk about that, about what we're going through politically, about us versus them or they and all of this, you have these two sides like a sports team.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the good guys and the bad guys, and you know
Right
based
and
on the story
wrong.
that we tell. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
based on the story that we tell, we have a lot of fear around it. And it's intentional because once you're in fear, you're in survival and you only have three choices: fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah, and I
So
think that is literally where everyone is,
Mhm.
especially as it relates to this election. If you are for Trump, you are terrified of what a Biden administration will look like. And if you are for Biden, you are terrified of what 4 more years of Trump will look like. But I think at the end of the day, I was listening, my cousin sent me like a podcast, and they went through three hypothetical scenarios of this election. And at first, it was terrifying. But after I was done, I was like, well, I feel a little bit more prepared now. You know, I think I think the last election cycle, I mean, for me specifically, there was really no lane in my brain that Trump would have been the victor. And I think that is the case for a lot of people. And so I think it's super important with, you know, 7 days, 6 days, however many days till the election now, that we get really comfortable with our worst case scenario, even if that's not the likely scenario, that we can normalize it so that it's not such a shock to the system and we have to go into that, you know, fight, flight, or freeze mode. We can function through it because at least we've kind of mentally prepared ourselves for worst case.
And also, I think visioning for the future. Like we all know what we're against. I
Mm-hmm.
think we're pretty clear on
Clear
what
on
we're
that.
against.
Yeah.
But not very many people are concentrating on what they're for
Mm-hmm.
and what they want to create, what they envision for the future. And I
Yeah.
think as long as you're fighting against something, you don't have a clear vision. But the people that you're fighting against, they do have a clear vision.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think if you're fighting against anything, you have to realize that there is no forward momentum, you know, if you're fighting against something. So if you can get clear on the vision, regardless of this hard thing, that at least you have some other, you know, workarounds to this one thing that is going to be a barrier. So yeah, no, I completely agree.
And I think in order to get there to this place where we can create something different, something that looks and feels uh, better in so many ways and more loving, I think you have to be aligned with source because that's where you get creative ideas.
Mm-hmm.
It's not when you're in fight, flight, or freeze. You're just looking to survive. You're just on that base level. And so how do you get people to be in alignment with source because that's where there's no fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so no matter what is happening, and I have an illustration for that, a visual. It comes from the movie Gladiator with Russell Crowe.
Mhm.
So he knows who he is. He is, the leader of the soldiers, but nobody else knows who he is because now he's a slave and they are using him to fight to the death, gladiator. So the first time that he goes out there into the arena, the camera is at his back and the doors open, and there are 5 ways that something can come through the gate.
Mhm.
He doesn't know what's going to come through the gate at him, but he's so confident and so aware and alert that he just walks out there without any hesitation with his shield and his sword because he knows who he is. Then they cut away to the other slaves in the background and they're nervous for him,
Yeah.
but he's not nervous.
Yeah.
So that's how I see people that are aligned with spirit. We're in a space where I don't care what's coming out of those 5 gates. I am going to not only survive, but I'm going to thrive and create something from chaos, because chaos and opportunity are the same word in Chinese language.
Mhm.
And I know that in my life and in your life, you've taken chaos and turned it into opportunity. And so that's what spirit can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that is the source of our power. And I think we are completely powerless until we can step into that knowing. And getting there is an ever evolving process. I don't think that ever anyone can say, okay, I'm aligned with spirit and now I'm good and all the work is done. Like, it is always a continued work, it is always a continued effort. But I think if your work is to be aligned with spirit, then you are divinely blessed and should have no worries. Because if, I think about how hard I work for my job. And what I've found over the last couple of years is that when I work too hard, the results don't translate. But when I take the time to work on myself and work less at working at my job, that the results are tenfold that of what I could have achieved independent, of tapping into that source and tapping into who I am. So it really has been less of asserting the effort and, full throttle foot on the gas to make something happen. It is really been more of like a leaning back into trusting that whatever is supposed to happen for me is going to happen. And if that means not achieving something or missing out on something, that only means something better is on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And so this last couple of 6 months or so really
Mm-hmm.
has been an evolution of that, because I've had, let's say, 3 or 4 training classes at work in that amount of time, but yet this is my best one over that span. And this is the least amount of effort that I've asserted to get it done, but I have been so crazy focused on staying true to who I am and stepping into my power and letting that be what guides me and what fuels me.
Wow. Yeah. So that's a big, you have a big example of how you took care of yourself, focused on being aligned, still did your work,
Mhm.
but it seemed like it was less of an effort.
Yeah, I think, well, first and foremost, the more and more you do something, the more it becomes a habit and it becomes ingrained into, the everyday aspects of your life. And I think what I learned was a lot of that urgent effort came from fear, came from fear of not achieving the results, came from fear of not doing a good job. And in the grand scheme of things, it was not even accurate. It really was differentiating the voices, because I was listening to what would be, the devil and the stress and the negative, and letting that be what guided me. But getting now to the point where it's like, look, I'm going to do what I am called to do every day, and no more and no less, and and really just letting that, trusting that, trusting that has been what has transformed my outlook on a lot of things. I just had a group meeting with all of the other recruiters, and they all asked, like, what did you do differently? And I was like, I took care of myself. I prayed on it. I was vulnerable with everyone in my office about what I needed to achieve my results and asked for their help. And this is what the outcome was. So I don't take credit. I am very honest about what led me there, but I don't know in the corporate business world if that actually lands, but that's okay. Because I'm being true and authentic and honest about my experience, and that's all I can do.
Right. You mentioned about how it translates in the corporate world and even in the mental health world. When you talk about spirituality, people are trying to say, "Oh, you mean mindfulness?" or, "What do you mean by that?" And I was like, "Well, it's so essential to mental health that it is so obvious for me, but then trying to explain it
Right.
the way we've been explaining it, it's getting in alignment with an energy that is for you and not against you, and trusting in that energy. And people are like, well, so how do what's that all about? So I think people are coming on board. I think because of the lockdown and people having to really put things in perspective, what's important in my life, all that kind of thing. I think they're more open to it. And like people, like you said, people want to know, like, what are you doing? What's different? What are you doing differently?
Yeah, and I think people hear spirituality and sometimes will go into religion, like
Yes.
religious practice. And I think for myself, that was something that I struggled with because I grew up Catholic. Then when I was in high school, I was baptized as Baptist. And then my ex-husband was Seventh-day Adventist. So
Oh,
I
wow.
mean, I have been through all types of religions, and for me, it is just divine source.
Mhm.
You can call whomever, whatever you want. And I think getting to the point of just knowing that there is greater source besides, the human flesh, and identifying and tapping into that, and not getting so distracted with the denominations or certain spiritual practices, like letting the universe guide you, on the path that is best suited for you. I can't say that everyone should meditate or everyone should pray, or because that may not be what resonates with them. But for
Right.
me, that's what I've been called, that's the path that I've been called down.
Mhm.
And that's what's working for me. So I can
Mhm.
share that. But if folks aren't yet in the mindset to receive that, then they have to, at the very least, just take little moments to receive those messages so that they can be guided to whatever is best suited for you. I have been getting consistent messages about juicing, and I am fighting it, but I think I'm gonna I think
You too. Oh my God.
I've
I've
been
been, I've been doing this. I've been getting the same messages as well.
yeah. So
So
I think I'm gonna
I,
have to get into, I think I'm at the very least just for like a little cleanse, but it's
yes.
been constant, like, you should cleanse yourself. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm fine, I'm gonna eat this cheeseburger. But
Oh,
yeah, so it evolves, right? Like,
yes, it
I
does.
wasn't getting cleansing messages a couple months ago. I haven't wasn't getting connect with divine feminine energy a couple months ago, but that is the messaging that source is bringing me now, because that's where I'm up to speed with, and that is what is going to continue me on this journey. So it really is just paying attention to your what you think is your mind.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good point. Yes. And instead, people pay attention to outside sources. So it's more about connecting with an inside voice. And no, you're not crazy if you're listening to your inside voice. That's,
Right.
so all of that people have to get over that.
Yeah, and I think just get clear about why are you doing what it is that you're doing. Are you doing it because this is what you think someone else wants you to do because then they'll approve of whatever version of you know, like what's the why behind all of what you're doing, and getting to a place of only moving through what feels good versus what feels necessary. You know, like in my career, I felt the need to show up as one version of Leslie to be accepted and approved of by, you know, white corporate America. But this year it has been, I'm just going to show up as authentically as I can in service of myself and my soul and nourishing me, and trust that you guys are just going to be able to deal. and,
Right.
and seeing that opportunity comes from authenticity versus coming from a different version, a made up version of yourself. And I think that social media, when used inappropriately, is that perpetuation of how do I show up like this skinny girl? How do I do my hair like this person? How do I live my life like this way, when it really isn't in service of you? Somebody else might be doing something that, you know, will not feel good to you. And so paying attention to that.
So it sounds like authenticity and truth and balance, self-care are
Mm-hmm.
kind of all themes that we got today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Would
That's
you add anything to that? I mean,
gratitude, gratitude,
gratitude.
gratitude, gratitude. You know, having a support system. Like, I stormed out of the house on Wednesday and went to a really good friend's house who could sympathize and empathize and, you know, tell me that I wasn't crazy and, you know, send me back on my way. So I think leaning on those that love you and that are, you know, sent to support you, you have to trust that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a good point.
Mhm.
That's a good point.
Support.
And
Even in this
also,
virtual world, support is very important.
yes, yes.
Mhm.
And also the intention. Why am I doing this? What is my intention for doing this? What is my intention for saying this?
Mhm.
What is my intention for being here? Um, all of that is so important too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And coming to the intention of that source, that intention of source is for you to be love itself.
Hmm. And what I've learned is I can't effectively have someone else feel my love for them if I don't feel my love for myself.
Mm.
So if I'm not in a good place and interacting with others whom I love, that might not be the version of me that they're receiving. And so in my mind, I might be giving love, but in they're receiving whatever, you know, chaos and negative unself love that I might be feeling. So it's important to be in love with yourself so that you can spread love to others.
Oh, that's big.
Yeah.
So that sounds like a closing
It.
remark. You can drop the mic after that. I mean,
That's it. I like it.
that's as big as it gets. You've got to love yourself. You've got to be love itself.
Yeah. So get to
Wow.
that. Get to that.
Yeah. So I'll see you next week.
See you next week. All right. Bye, Dr. Smith.
Bye bye.